Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the GSMC Relationship Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And as usual, I am your host, Giovanna. How is everyone doing today? I hope everyone had an awesome 4th of July and everyone was safe and had fun. At least where I am, it is very hot. So we got to go swimming and, have some twisted teas and all that fun stuff. But yeah, so today I am really excited about the topic because I'm going to be talking about all things weddings. So the summertime is, normally wedding season. I know, unfortunately, a lot of people have had to postpone their wedding this year due to COVID. But I figured, why not still have a wedding episode? If you are feeling a little bit down about having to postpone your wedding, know that in this episode, I'm actually going to be debunking and explaining some of the very common traditions that we have in weddings. And for the last segment, I'll be talking about 10 unique traditions from other countries. So right now I am recording from the U.S., so I would assume Canadian and U.S. Traditions are going to be pretty similar, but I am coming from this with a Western perspective. So as I haven't really been to any wedding other than an American one, I don't really know some of the cultures and norms. But for some of these have originated all around the world. And yeah, so that's why I wanted to talk about some different cultures' wedding traditions. So if you're feeling kind of bummed about having to cancel or postpone your wedding, know that a lot of the strange traditions that we have for weddings are pretty arbitrary. So yeah, the first one I'm going to talk about is actually going to be engagement rings. So why giving your spouse a diamond ring and proposing to them seems like it's something that has always been a part of our history. But at least in the US, getting an engagement ring was created by a company, and very specifically the DeBoer's Diamond Company. So DeBoer's, they were a diamond company, and they were like, hey, we're not making as much money as I thought we would be making. So why don't we tell people that they need to buy diamonds to marry someone? So the whole point is the reason why they picked diamonds, or why they ran with it for their ad campaign, is because diamonds are the strongest gem, and it's like your love is as strong as a diamond and will be forever as a diamond is. So what they did is they launched this huge ad campaign that said you need to buy a diamond for your spouse to ask them to get married to you, or you're just not a very good husband. Now, this is also probably going to be a little bit more heteronormative episode, but know that the reason why I talk about this stuff is that all of this stuff is pretty arbitrary. So if you are a gay or queer couple, this just goes to show how these traditions really don't mean that much. So the tradition stands is that a man is supposed to propose to a woman with a diamond ring that is 2 months his salary. Now, this was all created so that the DeBoer's company could make as much money as possible. So at first, their ad, the people who were in charge of marketing for this ad campaign said a diamond has to be a 1 month's salary, but now we say it has to be 2 months' salary. And the reason now why it's a 2 month salary is because profits went down during this ad campaign, so they added on a second month. So you can spend up to 2 months of your salary on a ring, and the only reason that is why it is today is because in the 1920s, a diamond company made an ad and a poster and articles in the newspaper and said, this is how it's supposed to be. And it was probably the most successful ad campaign in history because we still follow it to this day, almost 100 years later. So, yeah, we've made it the norm. So now, even if you try to propose to someone without a diamond ring, they're going to want a diamond ring, which I'm going to get into that a little bit later, of how to have a different type of engagement ring, and not buy into this. But, also, DeBoer's chairman in 1999, Nicky Oppenheimer, said and was directly quoted in the magazine The Independent that diamonds are intrinsically worthless. And they say that so you won't try to resell a diamond to get the diamonds back into circulation. So why are diamonds so expensive to begin with? Well, that's because the DeBoer's conglomerate corporation, whatever, made a global economy, a global monopoly on diamonds, and now they artificially restrict the supply, so they can jack up the prices. Now, so diamonds in the wild, uncut, just normal diamond gemstones are really actually pretty common and are not as much as a 2 salary for just a diamond ring. 2 months salary, I mean. So they restrict the mining of their diamonds so they can sell them for more money, and they make it sound like you can't resell a diamond ring because they don't want you to know how badly you got screwed, basically, because there's really no resale value on diamonds at all. So diamonds are often passed down within your family, and you never really try to resell those diamonds. Maybe gold and silver might be a different story, but diamonds really aren't that uncommon in nature. But, we think that they are because this company artificially created a monopoly on diamonds so they could make more money. The reason why they did all of this was just so they could make more money, and have this monopoly here. So yeah, there really is no resale value for diamonds. Now, this leads me to, let's say you're hearing all of this and you're like, yeah, I don't really want a diamond ring. Or maybe you still might want a diamond ring, which who wouldn't blame you? I mean, it is driven into us from the time we were children watching romance movies and things like that we're supposed to get a diamond ring if you get engaged to. Now, there are some gorgeous rings out there that you can spend less than $100 on. I just scrolled through Etsy today while I was researching for this project, and there are some gorgeous colored gemstones and with raw cut gems, and also diamonds are not very good for the the environment. Mining for diamonds causes an extreme amount of stress on the environment and pollutes the people who live around diamond mines. And a lot of mine workers for diamonds are often treated not very well. So instead of buying a diamond ring that is 2 months of your salary, see if you can find a ring that's on a website that is sustainably sourced, and also that is a little bit more unique. Because the whole reason that this whole diamond thing started was to symbolize the strength of your love and the lastingness of your love, I guess, between you and your partner. But your love is also unique, and the person you're marrying is also unique. Otherwise, you wouldn't be marrying them. So why not get a ring that's just as unique as the person that you're asking to marry you? I mean, everyone is going to have a diamond ring, but who's going to have like a sapphire wedding engagement ring, or like an amethyst, the purple one, like there are gorgeous, gorgeous gemstones out there, and there are very pretty rings that are often made by independent artists and who have sourced the gold or the silver or the whatever it is in the ring and the gemstones that are in the ring a lot more sustainably than the gold and the diamonds that are in the very expensive diamond engagement ring that you've bought at Jared. Now, if you did that, there's no shame on you, because that is what is culturally relevant and culturally important. But if this isn't something that's for you, and you experience guilt from maybe your friends or your family, know that and explain to them that, the only reason this is normalized is because a company in the 1920s told us it was normal. So if that's something that you don't really want to go the traditional route, you can say like, hey, this really wasn't a tradition in the first place. It was just a company trying to make boatloads of money. So that is pretty much everything about diamond engagement rings and why engagement rings are, not really necessary. But if you want a diamond ring, that's totally fine. It's ingrained in our culture and ingrained in us. And if that's something that's important to you, that's okay, because we have been taught that that's important. And, get you a diamond ring. But, there's a lot of very beautiful rings out there that you can purchase for your future fiance. So we are going to take a quick break for a commercial, but right after we get back, we're actually going to be talking about the origin of bridesmaids and groomsmen. Holy moly, bridesmaids and groomsmen. And there's a lot of very interesting stuff about that. So please stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Back. I forgot to talk about the source that I used for the last episode. I mostly you can get it right on YouTube. It's an Adam's Ruins Everything He did one just about engagement rings, and all of his sources are right there. I think Adam Ruins Everything is a good. He also has a podcast too, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, or like debunking common myths and or common traditions, I guess. He talks a lot about that. Another one of my favorite ones for Adam Ruins Everything is why we keep our salary secret. It should be normalized that you talk about your salary because that's how wage gaps happen, and that's why there are women and minority people of color and things like that are paid less because we are taught not to talk about our salary. So that's another really great Adam's Ruins Everything video that you can check out too. I highly recommend. But for this one, I really like Mental Floss. They post a lot of really cool stuff. I found a Mental Floss article that is titled 21 Surprisingly Historical Duties of the Wedding Party. So this one is written by Jen Dahl and was published December 18th, 2016. And this one, she talks a lot about the history of the wedding party and the wedding procession and things like that. So the most common thing that I did find about bridesmaids was that in ancient Rome and also in ancient China, I believe it was, there was multiple women who were dressed, they were all dressed the same way. So at first, bridesmaids and the bride wore the exact same thing, and they also wore a very heavy, thick veil. And the reason why they did this was to, one, ward off evil spirits. So they believed that if all of the bridesmaids and the bride was wearing the same thing, it was less likely for the evil spirits. They would get confused and not know which one was the bride, and it was meant to ward off the evil spirits. Also, in reality, it was used because brides, especially I read in China, it was very common for brides to be kidnapped. It was also very common, it seems like everywhere, for the family of the bride or the father of the bride to get angry that she was being married off, maybe to someone that he didn't approve of or that the family didn't approve of. And there's a possibility that they would steal the bride back from the groom. And so the whole point was for all of the bridesmaids to dress the exact same way so they couldn't be stolen, or that their dowry wasn't going to be stolen. Because sometimes brides with their bridesmaid would travel a long way with their dowry to meet their future husband. And so they didn't want the dowry to be stolen. And so each of the bridesmaid would help carry the dowry. And if they were traveling with a group, they were less likely to be robbed or attacked or anything like that. Conversely, the groomsmen were used so the best man, in medieval England, he was literally the best man. And what that means was he was the best fighter, or he was the best swordsman. So he was used to protect the bride during the ceremony from anyone who was trying to, I guess a bride kidnapping was very common in ancient times and in medieval times. So he would stand right next to the bride and protect the bride during the ceremony to ward off anyone who wanted to steal the bride. Also, the groomsmen as a whole could also go and steal a bride from her family, and they would just all scoop up and take her away. So the best man, though, would stand right next to the bride, and then after the ceremony, he was there to guard the new home of the bride and the husband. So that was literally the best man for the job. Also, the stag party was actually dates back to ancient Rome, and basically, all of his friends would go and party with the groom, just like now, but that actually goes all the way back to ancient Rome. Also in ancient Roman law required at least 10 witnesses to be present at the wedding. So because of that, that is basically where bridesmaids and groomsmen were supposed to be the original witnesses. Now, we still need witnesses in modern weddings, so it still gets the job done. But for a lot of these, it was mostly to ward off evil spirits, but it was also used in a more practical way. So the flower girl, for example, not, a part of the bridesmaids and the groomsmen, but the flower girl originated because during the medieval times, the self-hygiene was not as up to par. And when you get a lot of people at a wedding ceremony at the same time, when there's no indoor plumbing, it can get very smelly. So what the flower girl's job was to carry herbs and flowers down the aisle to make sure that it doesn't smell as bad, because man, people smelled so bad. Also, open carriages, which is what the bride and groom will leave in, were considered to be an easy target for evil spirits. So the wedding guests would use bells and firecrackers to scare the bad omens away, or the bad spirits away. And even today, we will sometimes honk horns after a ceremony gets out. So that's us, I guess, trying to ward the evil spirits away. And also, bridesmaids had a lot to do with whether or not they're going to get married in the future. So it was said that if you were a bridesmaid more than 3 times before you got married, so a bridesmaid also had to be younger than the bride, and if you were a bridesmaid more than 3 times, you were less likely to get married. Or you weren't going to get married, I mean. But to reverse that, you had to be a bridesmaid 4 more times, and then you would get married after that. So if you hadn't gotten married after 3 times of being a bridesmaid, you have to do 4 more times. So that totals of being a bridesmaid 7 times, and then you could get married. And with the bouquet, now that we throw the bouquet, so to see who is the next person to get married, they would also do that to where that originates is that the husband would throw his shoe at the bridesmaid to establish dominance, and then the wife would throw the shoe at the bridesmaids, and whoever caught the shoe was going to be the next person to get married. And so the maid of honor is also someone that is supposed to be older than the bride, and she is also someone who is supposed to be of high moral stature. So she was only supposed to be married once, and her husband still has to be alive. And she was basically supposed to help out the bride. She had to hold the bride's gloves, and she had to connect the hands of the bride and groom. So yeah, and in medieval times as well, the witnesses or the witnesses of the marriage, they were required to get very involved by checking to see if the stocking had blood on it that proved the marriage had been consummated. Yikes. But going back to some of the more superstitions about being a bridesmaid, which is still pretty relevant in today's culture. I mean, think of the movie 27 Dresses. Reading this article reminded me so much of that movie. But it was actually, if a bridesmaid stumbled walking down the aisle, the superstition was that she would never marry. Which, okay, I mean, I guess if you're a clumsy person, that could be problematic, but whatever. But a lot of the we're going to talk a little bit about this actually in the next segment, but a lot of the today's traditions were made in Victorian England. So Queen Victoria at that time had a lot of traditions that she made precedent and that she started. One of those traditions was that all of the bridesmaids, including the bride, wore white. This could be a nod to purity, and also that all the bridesmaids looked the same to ward off the evil spirits. So that actually goes back with history. But later on in the 19th century, that was actually made out of fashion, and the bride was the only one wearing white, and the other women wore different dresses, so the bride could stand out a little bit more easier. But Victorian bridesmaids were also tasked with making party favors out of ribbons and things like that, and they were giving them to the guests there. And a bridal shower actually goes back to if a woman's family couldn't either A, afford a dowry, or they didn't approve of the marriage and didn't want to give a dowry. It was the bridesmaids' jobs to basically come together and give the bride a gift so she could afford a dowry, essentially. But yeah, it's a lot of really interesting things, and a lot of our traditions today have to do with either warding away bad spirits or having to do with some strange law or tradition from medieval times or even from ancient times. So that's why reading this, it just made me think like, man, what is it stopping you just from going down to especially if you're not a religious person. I guess if you're a religious person, there are more traditions that you would like to hold a little bit more closely in your heart, especially if that's important in your family. So I totally understand that. But especially if you're not a religious person, what's stopping you from like going to the courthouse, having the judge marry you and your spouse, and then just going and having a barbecue? Now, I love to travel, so I would much rather spend like thousands of dollars to fly first class to some like amazing country for 2 weeks than spend a lot of money on a wedding and a ring and a dress and all the food. And of course you have to have an open bar, but you know, you can spend less money on the ceremony and just have a nice little get together with your friends and family, and then go all out on the honeymoon and just have an amazing time with your new spouse. But yeah, that is going to conclude the party, I guess the wedding procession or the wedding party, segment. And in the next segment, we're going to be talking about wedding cakes. And, there's a lot of history that has to do with wedding cakes and why they're a thing. But we are going to pause for a commercial break, and then we'll be right back after.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So, to continue with our episode of All Things Weddings, we're going to be talking about the weird history of wedding cakes. Now, I found an article on Food Network, and I thought, what a better source to use than the Food Network website to learn about the weird history of wedding cakes. So once again, Queen Victoria has established quite a bit of a history when it comes to wedding cakes. So when Queen Victoria the First married Prince Albert in 1840, she was the first person to like have a huge, big white wedding cake. The reason why the wedding cake was white was a nod to purity, of course. But white icing at the time, or white sugar, was considered to be, it was more widely available in England at the time, and it was considered to be the most pure type of sugar because, like, cane sugar is a little bit more yellowy, and white sugar is more refined and more pure. So, of course, Queen Victoria wanted the best of the best, and so her icing was completely white, and now even to this day, we refer to that icing with white sugar as royal icing, and the cake at that time, in 1840, weighed nearly 300 pounds and was 9 feet in circumference. So, homegirl went big. But the actual origin of wedding cakes, according to this article, it seems a little bit more Western. So I am sure that there has been lots of history of wedding cakes in more Eastern cultures and things like that. But this is what I could find. But in ancient Greece, the groom would break a loaf of barley over the bride's head, and that was to symbolize fertility. And then guests of the wedding would scramble to pick up the crumbs, and that meant that they could take some home for good luck. And then in medieval England, they would have like a tower of small, like, spiced buns that they would make. And if they could kiss over the large tower of these buns and not knock the tower over, that meant that they would have a lifetime of prosperity together. And before big, huge wedding cakes were a thing, wedding pies were actually the go-to. That was the norm. Wedding pies were supposed to be the wedding cakes of the time, and they were also filled with more savory stuff. They had meats and spices and things like that, and sometimes they would hide a ring inside of the pie, and then that the superstition was if the woman to find the ring in the pie would be the next person to marry. Now, I don't know if maybe what if a man found that ring? I would suppose it would go the same way. But yeah, there's also superstitions that the bride cannot make her own cake. Also, if the bride tries the cake before the wedding, that's supposed to be bad luck as well. And she will lose her husband's love. Also, every guest must eat a part of the cake to ensure that the couple will be blessed with children. That's another thing that, like, what if the people don't want kids? Like, it doesn't really matter that much now, you know? But yeah, now I've been to weddings where they've had cupcakes with different flavored cupcakes, and I've been to weddings where they've had multiple cakes, so some that don't have, like, isn't made with milk or something, or, you know, I guess there are all sorts of different wedding cakes, but it's so interesting to me that some form of cake, bread, biscuit has been used in weddings since the ancient Roman times. You know, with the guy breaking the barley over the woman's head. They used to be able to throw pies at brides too. That was supposed to be the tradition, which now, like, there's a whole thing now, if you've ever been to weddings where the bride and the groom eat the cake, but then they smash it all over each other's faces. So I thought that was funny, where, like, some of these things kind of still ring true today. But yeah, I also, on this article, which is the secret history of wedding cakes on the Food Network website, they had at the very end record-breaking wedding cakes, and I did want to share that with you today because I thought these were so funny. But here it says the most expensive wedding cake was valued at $52 million, adorned with 4,000 diamonds. That is nuts. It doesn't say who commissioned for this wedding cake, And if the $52 million is adjusted for inflation and when this happened, I would assume that this was pretty recent. But yeah, so the world's largest wedding cake stood 17 feet tall and weighed in at 15,032 pounds. It was created for the Mogan Sun Hotel and Casino for a 2004 bridal showcase. So here's my question about that. If it was just a bridal showcase, was there even a wedding? Like, who ate this cake? If it was just a bridal showcase, it doesn't say that it was an actual wedding. But yeah, that is nuts. I don't know what these are, if you use the metric system, what those things are, but either way, it is a huge cake. I mean, think about 17 feet tall. I mean, I'm 5'2", but like, think about, that's so many of me. That's like 3 of me. I can't. That's nuts. Okay, and the last one is the most expensive slice of wedding cake was taken from the 1937 wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, which sold at auction in 1998 for $29,000. Oh my God. I know there is a tradition about wedding cakes. I should have looked into this, but I know there's a tradition where you're supposed to save like the top tier and eat it on your first anniversary a year later, which is kind of gross. I don't know if that's something that maybe it came from like in medieval times where, food wasn't as, there was a lot of, food shortages all the time, and maybe it has something to do with that, and saving the food. But yeah, it's supposed to be good luck to eat your cake a year after your wedding. But I wonder if that slice of wedding cake from 1937 was something that they just saved in Buckingham Palace or something, and then they're like, I wonder why that's still there. I wonder if we can auction it. So yeah, it's very interesting to say the least, I suppose. But yeah, that's on wedding cakes. So now you can have so many different kinds of wedding cakes, and but still, like, even the white frosting was something that most wedding cakes are going to be white. But even that is just a tradition from Victorian times, and the only reason that was a tradition was so Queen Victoria could kind of show how powerful she was, that she could afford an entire cake that was 9 feet in circumference, or however huge that cake was, of all white sugar. That's really all it was, because white sugar is supposed to be the best sugar available. So now, even if you want a marbled cake or a cake that isn't white, don't feel pressured to. Unless tradition is something that's really, really important to you, or if you want to have a wedding that's a little bit, it's different. These are all traditions that we make normal because it's how history was, but really it's mostly about money, and it's mostly about things that we really don't care about anymore as we live in a mostly sex positive and open society. It's okay if the bride isn't a virgin on her wedding night, so it's, like these things, if you're thinking about having a non-traditional wedding and your family is kind of giving you grief about it, there's a lot of stuff online that you can research and show them, like, hey, all of this started, but just because of money and power. That's the only reason why we have these traditions today, which is what I'm trying to say for this episode. But yeah, it's your wedding, so do what you want with it. So moving on, this is going to be our last segment. We're going to be talking about cool wedding traditions from around the world. So I hope to see you back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And we're back. Okay, so I wanted to use this segment as a way to show some traditions in some countries that aren't necessarily Western countries. And there's a lot of really cool traditions out there. And it also goes to show that maybe we might think that traditions are very, very important. But, you know, really, there's traditions all over the world, and there's different traditions. And the traditions that we hold to such high importance are mean nothing to other countries. So it's like looking in a different perspective, I guess. So for example, in Kenya, there are some parts in Kenya where the bride will leave with her new husband, and they have your dad spit on you. And the point is, I guess what the basic point is like in theater we say break a leg, and we say to break a leg because we don't want to jinx them. So when we say break a leg in theater, we say that so we don't want them to break a leg. And the whole point is to the purpose is to not tempt fate by being too supportive of the newlyweds. So basically, by spitting on the newlyweds, that is actually good luck. So you're trying to not jinx their happiness, basically. Also, we have in China, the groom will shoot arrowheads will shoot arrows that don't have arrowheads in them, so it is kind of safe, at the bride with a bow and arrow several times, and then collects the arrows and breaks them during the ceremony to ensure their love lasts forever. So this gives me a lot of like Cupid's bow and arrow vibes. I would love to know the origin of this history. This article that I got all these from, it was published in brides.com, and it's called 47 Fascinating Wedding Traditions from Around the World, and it's written by Nancy Matea and Andrea Park. So like it doesn't really go into a lot of explanation and origin stories to these. They're just little snippets from traditions around the globe. But I'd love to figure out where that originated from. And then in France, the bride and groom will consume chocolates and champagne from a toilet bowl, and the point is to give the two some strength before their wedding night. I'm not sure how drinking from a toilet bowl is supposed to give you strength, but hey, man, whatever fits your fancy, I guess. And then in Greece, this is kind of cool because we were just talking about the roles and the historical roles of bridesmaids and groomsmen. But in Greece, the word groomsman is actually pretty literal because the best man becomes the barber, and he shaves the groom's face. After this, the mother of the bride, so his new mother-in-law, will feed him honey and almonds. So he'll be freshly shaved and a belly full of honey and almonds. Again, I'm not sure where this originated from, but that is pretty cool. You know, guys looking out for dudes, making sure he's looking all fresh and shaven for his wedding day. So I do like that. There's a tradition in Lebanon where the wedding celebration known as Zayf, it's spelled Zaffe. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm so sorry. It gets off to a rowdy start with music, belly dancing, and shouting at both the groom's and bride's homes, courtesy of the couple's friends, family, and occasionally professional dancers and musicians. Eventually, everyone ends up at the bride's house where the couple is showered with blessings and flower petals as they leave for the ceremony. I think that's so cool because they're literally starting out with a giant dance parade and they just kind of like party, and that's how they get it started. I love that idea. I feel like the most important things for weddings is the celebration between, you know, because this is two families, two lives coming together to make a new family. And whether that is with, you know, just the husband and wife, if they plan on having kids, if they have pets, whatever it may be, it's going to be a family nonetheless and a union. And I think the best way to celebrate that is by having a giant party. And what says having a good party like a bunch of dancers and musicians? I love that. So moving to India, on the day of the wedding, there's a ritual called, again, I am really going to butcher this pronunciation, Juta Chupai, is an Indian bride's mischievous sisters and female cousins make off with the groom's shoes and demand a ransom money for their safe return. I love these fun little pranks like this and traditions like that. I wonder if the ransom money may go towards the honeymoon, or maybe go towards like the bar tab or something like that. It would be interesting to see what that money is used for, because I know in a lot of American weddings, sometimes there'll be like money collections to help pay for the honeymoon and things like that. And so I'm curious to see what the money is used for. We're going to continue with how to pay for this very expensive celebration. This one is something that I've actually have heard of before, or maybe it's a tradition that is also in a couple different countries. This is in Cuba, and it's called the money dance, and it's a Cuban custom that every man who dances with the bride must pin money to her dress to help the couple pay for their wedding and their honeymoon. I've also heard of other customs where the bride has a small like coin purse, or like a pouch that she'll wear around her waist, and men who would like to dance with the bride, and it's custom that all of the men will dance with the bride so they can raise money to help pay for the wedding, and they will just slip it into the purse, which I guess would make sense, because I'm not sure, do they have to bring their own pins, and what if like they lose the bills or something like that? So I'm not sure how that happens, I guess. Now, this next tradition I think is so much fun, and I'm a big Office fan, and it reminds me of when Pam and Jim ran off in their ceremony, so I'll get to it. In Venezuela, the bride and the groom are expected to just go missing. So basically, the Venezuelan bride and groom are supposed to sneak away before the party's over without getting caught, and it's supposed to be for good luck. And it's also good luck for whichever is the first guest to guess it, to notice that the bride and the groom are gone. So it's good luck if they don't get caught, and it's also good luck for the guest who's like, has anyone seen Cheryl and Tommy? Because I don't know where they are. So I think that is so much fun, and it would just be a cool thing. Like, do you guys just go get pizza afterwards? Like, what fun. So we are going to go back to China real fast. I have a feeling that China has a lot of very cool historical traditions. But I know, like, today in the U.S., having multiple dresses has actually become a little bit more in favor and in fashion, where before the dress was supposed to symbolize, like, you're supposed to wear the same one the whole time. But in China, brides are known to have many and multiple dresses for each section of the wedding, which I can kind of understand. I've been to a wedding where it was a Catholic wedding, and the bride had a very traditional dress for the actual ceremony in the church, and then during the reception she had a shorter dress because she loved to dance. It was easier for her to move around and stuff like that, and I can honestly see that if that's something that you can fit in your budget. And also, she told me that the shorter dress was way more cheaper anyway than the bigger traditional dress. But anyway, in China, brides typically walk down the aisle in a slim-fitting embroidered dress called a traditional qipao, or Kino Gusam. I'm so sorry. For the reception, they typically change into a more decked out gown with Western flair, for the last part, or for the middle part, I'm sorry. But there's a third dress, so to cap off the night, Chinese brides often make a final change into a cocktail dress. So that was kind of what, my friend had did before when I was at her wedding. But that's very cool. I think that's so much fun. If that's something that is up your alley, I'm totally here for it, especially if you're a bride who likes to party and move around and dance. Like, yeah, get yourself a cocktail dress. One that's a little bit easier to dance in. All right, so this, the last one is going to be an Italian tradition. I'm an Italian and I spent 3 months in Italy, last summer. So, I'm getting a little bit nostalgic because this time last year I was in Italy. So I figured I'd save the Italian tradition for last. So in Italy, there's a tradition called the La Serenata. And, basically the night before the wedding, an Italian groom throws a surprise party outside his bride-to-be's window. And it begins with the groom, backed by musicians, serenading his fiancée, and then this in turn turns into a full-blown bash, complete with a lavish buffet and all of the couple's friends and family. I love this because it's so Italian to have a party before the party to prepare for the party. So I'm not sure if this is something that still happens today. I would assume it does, but I just think it's funny because in some traditions, it is bad luck to see the bride before her wedding day. I feel like if you're going to see your bride to sing her a love song and then throw her a party, I think that, could be used as an exception. So I don't know. Hopefully you're not too hungover the next day. Maybe the whole point is just to have some Prosecco and eat some nice meats and have an aperitif or something like that, and then not get too drunk for the ceremony the next day. Because also, if it's an Italian wedding, it may be Catholic and it's going to be really long. And so, yeah, maybe the goal is to not get too drunk. But yeah. So anyway, guys, that is going to conclude the wedding episode. I figured because right now it is wedding season, I don't know how many people are throwing weddings, but I hope you did enjoy it. And yeah, if you liked it, please share the episode, especially if there's someone who is planning a wedding or maybe they just got engaged. To just kind of like rest their worries, and that, sometimes you can't go with every single tradition that there is. Pick the ones that are most important to you and just go with that. And you know what? It's your day. It's not going to be your family's day. And I know that's easier said than done. But yeah, pick out the traditions that are most important to you. And maybe, if someone is giving you a lot of grief about how you're planning the wedding, one, remember it's your wedding, and also remember that, maybe give them like, okay, you can pick one tradition, one thing that means the most to you, and that's, what we're going to do. Because tradition is all about location, all about where you're born, and as each country is going to have their own wacky tradition. And, I would recommend just following your heart, doing what's best for you and your new, partner, your new spouse, and enjoy that time together in planning and stuff like that. But yeah, if you did like it, like the episode, please subscribe, to, the GSMC Relationship Podcast. Please leave a rating and review on Apple iTunes, because that really does help us out a lot. You can follow us on all the social media platforms. We're on Instagram at GSMC_relationship. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You can give us a like on there. But yeah, please do all of those things. And until then, I will see you guys on Thursday. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Relationship Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.